Biggest
for,
risk. Yeah.
yeah,
All right.
thanks for the question. I'll try to build on top of some of what was also said before, because
Okay.
I'll, where I sit, so just for context, last, let's say, 4.5 years, I've been building AI systems in financial services mostly. And so there's a lot of security and risk management involved. So probably more than you would see at your standard organization. A lot of the risk taking that you see is probably with smaller organizations or organizations that aren't as heavily regulated. So you see that push for speed and shortcut, taking shortcuts a lot more. However, there still is pressure from boards, CEOs, from CTOs to deliver something because competitors are delivering something. And a lot of the risk that you do see taken are still around some of the themes that we've covered already. Evaluations, right? And making sure the evals are very comprehensive. So what are your online evaluations? What are your offline evaluations? How do those change as the environment around your system changes? How do you measure those changes in your environment? Are your business metrics properly tied to those evaluations? And not only evaluations that you do offline, you can do online, right? So how do you account for that? Do you have proxy metrics? There's a lot of thought that needs to go into measuring the changing landscape that occurs. And then another theme that was already mentioned is the end-to-end observability, right? So you have your standard observability practices, right? You have your logging, you have your monitoring, you have your alerting. But is that properly tied to the business objectives? So are the tech team and the business team having the right conversations to make sure that you have the right thresholds for alerting on an AI system? How do you know when it's gone wrong? And again, another one that was mentioned is the guardrails. Is your AI properly aligned? So one big theme we see at my company, it's a big thing we push with clients. For clients, at least my clients have made sure that they really press on this, is responsible AI. What are your responsible AI metrics? How are you measuring them? One of the big risks I do see, though, is a lot of organizations don't have the central guardrails as like a floor mechanism. So let's say you have different teams that are deploying AI systems on an internal platform. How do you ensure that the different accesses to those LLMs are meeting a certain minimum bar for safety for the AI? A lot of those are dispersed amongst the different teams and their choices, and they all have different pressures to deliver. And so you have a bit of, sometimes you often see this decentralized nature of making key decisions, and one team might be following all the safety precautions, but another team
might not be.
Exactly. And so this decentralized pressure, this need to deliver creates this pressure for decentralization, and you don't see that internal investment in making sure that all AI across the organization is safe, while also making sure that we move at a very fast pace. And then another one I see is, because of that pressure, people are forcing AI in places where it just doesn't make sense, right? Where you just build, you can just have some Python code, get the job done, and you can have a deterministic system come out with the outcome, but you're having these non-deterministic agents, because we're still following our intuition on what are the rules. When does an AI agent really make sense versus when some Python code doesn't? And oftentimes it takes an expert to determine that, because the business will say, well, this is very complex, it's very vague, we don't know how. We're deciding, one person's deciding it one way and another person's deciding it this way, so we think an AI agent should do it. But that's not really the rule of thumb. The rule of thumb is going to be around cost, it's going to be around risk of, how consistent is the output going to be. There's many factors that go into deciding when an AI should do it versus just write some better Python code, right? Or use a traditional ML model, which is still a form of AI, but not Gen AI. So those are a lot of
fantastic, and just to ride on this last point, right? I can relate. because I mean, I also deploy systems, right? AI systems, so I can totally relate, right? You're trying to force a square peg in a round hole. Everyone is trying to throw AI at every single thing, right? So you see processes that, I mean, ideally, some Python script, would typically just solve, and then someone says no, it has to be AI, and you know really well that yeah, it's not going to do a great job. It's probabilistic, just like you said, not deterministic, right? So yeah, very, very, very. I mean, good point. And so I'm going to go back to Nadia, and Kekuro already mentioned how there's a lot of pressure from boards, from CEOs, trying to just to ensure that everybody's doing something AI related. So which means that organizations want to really move fast. Right. So my question to you, Nadia, is how can teams balance speed of innovation with responsible AI practices? How can they find that balance?
Yeah, so just before answering that question, I just want to say thank you to Kikura for mentioning about the concern, which is using AI at any cost. And you're so spot on, and you echoed that as well, Ayo. Unfortunately, because everyone is worried to miss the boat, so they say we need to use it as a AI strategist and innovation. And I keep telling you need the best solution for what you need to resolve. So instead of implement technology is a tool to help you to, for example, improve a business process or actually helping the company to be more proactive and productive. But this is unfortunately some of the pitfalls. So to come back to your question, which is how can teams balance the speed of innovation and responsible AI practice? So the first thing is companies, when they want to start implementing AI solution, as Kekura said, it needs to have the onboarding of the executive teams. So when you have from top to bottom, but then having that is not enough. You need when I look at where we have failures, and you have, for example, there's a statistics. I can bring back the numbers, but 80% of the companies are interested in implementing AI. Unfortunately, only about 10%, probably about 15% are successful. I'm not even talking about scalability, because they may have a center of excellence and have some prototype, but how much of these prototype are actually going live, and how many of them are actually scalable, you see? So there are all of these challenges, and there's an element that we forget. Why is so many AI project is not really as a good return on investment? And I'm sure I can count on my peers to add me any information on this, but why there's not a good return on investment? Why now? I mean, when I've seen over the years the appetite of AI projects, so like 5 years ago, like 3 years ago, so there's a lot of investment. Now it's coming a little bit down because the return on investment is not as visible, and we're having more concern about the trustworthiness. And that is because we forget two things: the change culture of the company, because what's happening is you have the lack of adoptions. You can set up any solutions, but if the end users is still going to go into its spreadsheet and loading the data the way that they want, you have deployed the solution, but with probably a 20% adoption level. And this is why as strategists, I think people forget that technology is not everything. Although we think that AI is going to replace you, you need a human to be able to use it, and it needs like the whole work. And this is where trustworthiness come along, and why trustworthiness that I mentioned at the beginning is how us human can trust the AI solution that we're deploying, that are being deployed. So you see this, to have a successful strategy, there's all of these components to take into account. To help us to do that, I know that, and if you can mention about some framework, yes, especially on responsibility AI, there's many frameworks being set up as well on to understand the readiness of companies as well. And so definitely the pressure, the framework, not forgetting the other elements to make sure that whatever solution you develop, but then make sure that when you explain your solution, that you are based on responsible AI.
Yeah.
But then it goes back to people are worried to miss the boat. Do they say, oh, we're going to be sacrificing a little bit of this and thinking that they're going to be successful, which actually has an impact on the delivery and even have an impact as well, saying early on their reputational risk and operational risk. So it's all a question of a good balance between all these elements.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nadia. Spot on. All right, so I'm going to ask another question. I'm just going to throw it open. So the question, I mean, let me give you some context before I go into the question. You know, sometime in 2024, I was talking to someone 2 days ago, and I was telling the person of how in 2024 I'd used Claude and ChatGPT to make a financial decision. So I was trying to decide if to invest, in a particular company, right? So I had gotten some financial details about the company. I pushed it into Claude. I think then Claude Artifacts had just come out, and I had also pushed it into ChatGPT. And I mean, they did the analysis, and the final result was, you can invest in the company. Now, two things. First, like Movology said at the beginning, ChatGPT, and I think Claude also does that, somewhere just below the chat box, it already tells you that it can make mistakes, so you need to be careful, right? Also, when the results came out from the platforms, immediately after the advice, it also mentioned you need to be careful. Don't take this as financial advice. Get a financial advice. So if you really want to make this decision, so I mean, it kind of like indemnified itself. So eventually, the decision I made to invest in that company was ultimately mine, and I was ultimately responsible because you had all this process. Now to my question. In an organization, right, where AI systems deployed, who should be responsible when an AI system makes an error? Of course, it's now remember in my case, very straightforward. There were lots of clauses by ChatGPT and Claude. Before I even had done anything, it was there. After I ran the prompt, it was also there, right? But in the case where organizations build these systems, who is responsible? And again, just throwing it open. Feel free to...
No, I could do it.
All three of you can also answer, by the way. But Annie, let's take you.
No worries. That's fine. And I think I wanted to go for this because